have some more sewing to do as well. Let me put my coffee out of the way. All right, so yesterday we went through the whole process of putting the kit together, talked about the pattern and all of the good information that's in here. And today we want to talk about binding. So binding is one of those things that people are often a little intimidated by just because it is different. And so don't try to do it the way that you normally do cotton binding. That's probably the number one mistake that people make, is that they'll cut it at 2 or 2¼ inches and fold it in half and try to sew it like a regular cotton binding. Too much, don't do it. We just want to do one layer, and we're just going to do a raw edge. We're not folding anything under, nothing. Okay. It is really super easy. It is shockingly easy compared to what people want to do. So they want to kind of complicate it, and I'm going to show you how to do it so that it's a lot easier. Okay, so I've got one sample mostly done. I'm going to show you the other part of that later. So yesterday, remember when we opened up the kit, I told you to put the binding to the side. We'll just deal with that later. And that is something that I always do, is I just put the binding out of the kit. Don't worry about it. I'll tackle it later. It just makes it a lot easier for me to cut all the pieces for the kit, put that together, and then deal with binding. It's just one less thing to worry about right now. So I've got my one that we did yesterday. I got it finished. So I got it all sewn together. I'm like, did I sew that on straight? Yes, I did. Okay. So I got this all sewn together. I trimmed up all the edges, and then I went ahead and I did a zigzag around all the edges. And I do that to kind of hold everything together, because the basting spray, I don't use a ton of basting spray. I'm not trying to glue it together forever. I'm just trying to hold it really while I'm constructing it, which means by the end of it, it can definitely get a little loose and floppy. So I just go ahead and zigzag all the edges. You can also serge all your edges, and it's totally fine too. And I do that usually if I'm backing a quilt with Cuddle. I'll go ahead and serge all those edges, but it works just fine to zigzag it as well. Okay, so I've gotten to this point.
What was that? Do you pin that before you zigzag?
If it's starting to come apart much, I do. Otherwise, it's pretty well like kind of sticking together, and I can kind of just shove it back to where it's supposed to be and zigzag it. If it's coming apart, the layers are coming apart, I'll pin them back together so that it stays there. But I trim it and then I stitch it together. So once I've trimmed it, I can kind of tell what needs to be pinned to keep it in place, because sometimes it really will have a lot fallen apart. And the other thing I do when I'm cutting it, we didn't talk about this yesterday, is that I'll often fold it in half on the second side cut to make sure that these ends are about the same. Okay, so I want to make sure that it's kind of squarish. And like I said, I don't really measure it, but I do a lot of like, oh, let me fold it in half that way. Okay, that's where it would match that way. How about if I fold it this way? Oh, that's where it'd match that way. Okay, I'll cut some lines. So I really don't get too picky about it. If you want to, you're more than welcome to. One of the things that I'll mention really quick too, that we didn't talk about yesterday, we talked a little bit about batting and why you might want to use it and why you don't want to use it. And I will show you that one of the reasons, like, this doesn't bother me, but I know it does bother people, is that you'll kind of get this little like sag thing going in there, that you can see like the ridge of the Luxe Cuddle underneath that. Let's see if I can get it. So you can see there's like a hump right there, and that's the seam allowance being stuck inside. When you do it with batting inside of it, you won't ever see that. So the batting kind of smooths it out. So I can't even feel it when I do this, because those lumps are on this side and the batting is on this side. Okay, so that's just another reason for you to like think through, what do you want to do? What do you want the finish to be like? And that's really what we're going for. Is what do we want it to finish like? Okay, that's what we'll make our choices beforehand.
Okay. With the batting, Teresa, do you trim that down if you don't want it to show? If you do the batting, would you trim that back or no?
Nope.
No. Okay.
No. Yeah, I just use the batting and the backing together. I spray base those together, sew the whole quilt the way it is, trim it up. So everything else is exactly the same. I would have just stuck batting in at the very beginning. Yeah. But so I've got this all finished, and now we need to tackle the binding. So I've got my Luxe Cuddle weave, which we're talking about here. Now I can't remember what the color was on it. Luxe Cuddle weave, it's going to be here, quartz. Which is a really pretty, like kind of a tan color. And I really do like this. It's very usable in lots of different things. So the first thing I need to do is I want to measure out my strips. So with the binding, we cut it at 1 3/4. Some people will cut it a little bit bigger, closer to 2 inches. I do 1 3/4, but if you're not very careful about your seam allowances, you should probably up it just a little bit. So this is one place that you kind of, a lot of places we could be a little fudgy and we're like, it's close to a 1/2 inch. It's a little more than a 1/2 inch. It's fine. For the binding, we actually have to be very precise. So if we're going to do 1 3/4 inch binding, we need to do it at a 1/2 inch seam allowance or just a scant 1/2 inch. If you tend to do a little bit bigger, just cut your binding a little bit bigger. It's easier to go bigger and pull it the right way than to be too small. Okay, so 1 3/4 is what I am going to mark mine at. I'm going to measure mine first here, and I've got 6.5 inches, and I need 3 strips. So I have plenty to do my 1 3/4 inches. So first, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to put my big long ruler up here. I'm going to see how straight is this. It's actually fairly straight. I'm just going to let it be. And then I'm going to go ahead and measure 1 3/4 inches and draw the line there. Okay, so again, this is the thing where we want to draw the line and then we'll cut it. And I'm going to mark all of these and then I'll cut. Okay, and I cut these, or I just draw this with the Sharpie. And I just drag it right along here. So now I've got this extra. If you decide to go a little bit bigger, that's how much extra room we've got on this for you to cut your binding just a little bit bigger. So we do give you room on here to cut your binding a little wider if you want to. Not much wider though. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna finish this edge. And the way I'm lining this ruler up, you can't really see it, but I will line up my line just past the line on my ruler, just past where I drew it, which will give it kind of like a heavy 1 3/4 inch. Okay, so now I've got all of my lines drawn on there and I can go ahead and cut that. So we talked yesterday about the different kinds of fabric and how you want to cut them. So Lux Cuddle, generally we want to cut with the blade or with the little scissors. What I have found with the Lux Cuddle, chenille, or the weave, it's just as easy to cut it with the rotary cutter. This is one of the few that I will just cut it with the rotary. It gets a really nice straight edge. It doesn't make it weird. And I haven't found that it's super helpful to take the time to do the blade or the little scissors. So we're just going to cut it with the rotary cutter and then shake the mess off. All right. So again, I'm just going to cut it a little bit at a time. When I do this, one of the things that I found is that if I try to use my ruler on here, this is when the ruler likes to swivel and sway, and I won't cut it as well. So I tend to draw the lines and then I cut it with my rotary cutter freehand. If you have a technique that works for you, you are welcome to use it, but this is what I do. And then I can just follow that line. So the biggest thing is just kind of keeping the same way when we cut with the blade the other way is we're keeping some tension against the blade. And then I just draw it right along here. Okay, and these strips, I think we talked about it a little bit yesterday. They are 60 inches wide, basically. It's 58 to 60 inches wide. Okay, so you can see I'm going to make a little bit of a mess. It's all right. I will clean it up. Okay, so we have 60 inches of strip or binding for each one of these strips. So I've found that you can kind of do a little bit of, you know, quick brain math and figure out how much you're going to need. This one, we need about 2.5 strips.
So there's a question, would a quilter select non-slip ruler work okay?
It works a little bit better. I have them. And they work a little bit better in that they hold, generally speaking. But what I have found is that when I'm pressing really hard, sometimes my hand will slip. If you're going to use any sort of ruler, definitely use one that has the grippy stuff on the back. And the Quilter Selector, my favorite. I have another little one somewhere. That's like the little 1.5 inch wide one, or 2.5 inch. I guess it's 2.5 inches wide, which would work better for this. So let me see if I can give it a try here. And that, yeah, that's holding just fine. So if you need to use a ruler to get a straight line, absolutely. This one seems to work. The one thing that you'll want to do is the fabric moves because it's knit, is you'll want to kind of make sure that you adjust it underneath the ruler to get lined up with the line that you already drew, because it will want to kind of wobble a little just because it's a knit fabric. Yeah, Quilter Select are great. Is that what you carry in your store, Pam?
Oh, yes.
Good. I
Yeah.
really like them. That big 20.5 inch ruler or whatever it is. It's kind of one of my
Yeah.
favorite, that big square
Yeah.
one. Oh my goodness. So worth the investment.
It is. They keep going up in price, but you know, if it saves you from mistakes
Oh yeah.
and makes the job easier, it's worth
Mhm.
it.
And honestly, they'll last you for years and years and years and years. I
Yes.
have rulers that I've had for 20 years. So as long as you don't accidentally step on one, it'll last you for a very long time. Okay, so now you can see I got a big old mess because I decided to cut this with the rotary cutter. That's what happens. When I first started working for the company and the first time that I did something like this and I cut a whole bunch of Lux Cuddle, I decided I would try to blow it off my table. I will tell you, do not, okay? Do not do that. It is a very bad idea. So instead, we're going to use the vacuum. I'm going to mute myself real quick so that I can vacuum. Let me see if I can get.
Yeah, that's the vacuum that we have at the shop. And we do love it. And as she said yesterday, it's because the airflow blows out of the back. And I'm also a fan of just shaking it outside.
All right. Yeah, I'm a fan of taking it outside too, but we're on the 4th floor here, so I don't do that anymore. I could probably hang it out the window and shake it. That would be pretty funny. Snowing. No, wait. It's just cuddle. Yeah, so this one likes to make a lot of mess and I just deal with it. But I like the way it looks. So, okay. So now we've got our strips. And like I said yesterday too, we really do want to try to get that cuddle dust off of there. This is a case that you could take these, cut these, gently take them to your dryer, toss them in there with a wet washcloth, let it tumble around for a few minutes and all the lint ends up in the lint trap. Great way of dealing with the lint with this one. Okay, so you're absolutely welcome to do that. I don't have a dryer here either, so I just get to shake and vacuum. Okay, we have like the float of cuddle. It's hilarious. Okay, so now I've got my strips. One of the things that you can see about the strips is which way the nap is going by how it's been cut off here and it kind of comes in here. So it almost looks kind of like a beveled edge up here. And you'll notice that when you cut it, that you can see where the nap is. And we want to take note of that when we're sewing our strips together. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lay out one end. And then I'm going to find another end. And I'm going to get these to match so I can tell that the nap is going down on both of them. All right. See if I can get this so you can see it. Okay. So I'm going to pet it. And those are both going the exact same way. So that's what we want. Because when we sew these together, we want this to continue just like regular continuous binding. So now I'm going to take this, just like we do cotton binding. And I'm going to pin it though on either side of where I want to stitch it. So at this point, it's pretty easy to know where we're going to sew it. We're going to sew it from this corner to this corner, just like we would with a cotton binding. But one of the things that I found is sometimes it's hard to see where that starts and stops because of all of those fibers. So this is an opportunity where you can go ahead and mark the back of it again, that's where we're going to sew it. And I'm just going to sew right along that line. Okay, so I'm going to do the other one real quick so I can sew both of my binding strips together. So I'll just find the other one. Make sure these are the same again. Do it just the same. This was, let me see. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. And I always overlap it a little bit so you can see like there's a little bit of tail on either side. I'm going to go ahead and mark that center from corner to corner. And this is where you can use the little marks on your ruler, the 45, get that to line up against your raw edge and know that you're actually making a good 45-degree stitching line. And then we'll go ahead and sew that. Okay, and I'm already covered in cuddle dust, which is hilarious. So one of the things that often happens when I'm in classes is people are like, oh, I wore black. And I'm like, I wear black all the time. I just walk around covered in it. That's all. Sometimes that's what happens. Don't worry about what color you wear. They invented lint rollers for a reason. All right. So now I'm going to sew on this line and I'm going to start in just a little bit. Then I'm going to back stitch and then I'm going to go forward. All right. That way it does not suck my fabric in when I start sewing, which is a common thing with this little area because it's so tiny. I'm just going to follow the line, back stitch a couple stitches, take it out. You can see I have left the pins in there the whole time just to stitch that line. All right, so that makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to come over and do my other one. Make it so that I have all the binding I need. So I don't need to add any mid binding. Okay, go ahead, take my pins out, and then I'm just going to trim these off. So I trim these a little bit shorter, more like I would for cotton, where it's about 1/4 of an inch. And I just trim off that extra bit. Okay, make sure it's gonna work okay. And I always like to trim just from the back because I can see it so much better. I can actually see how much my seam allowance is when I look at it from this side versus trying to look at it from the front of it where I can't really see much. Okay. So we're just going to trim these off. And now we have our binding. Okay, so this is how we're going to tackle it. So we've got our binding. We want to look and figure out which way the nap is going. So you can see again that little kind of like beveled edge up here. You see what I'm talking about? That I know is my top. I want to sew it onto it so that this comes around the front so that the nap is coming toward the front. That's where we're going to zigzag it. So I always want to stitch it to the back. The first line of stitching I'm going to do on the top edge. All right, so where the nap goes down. That's what I mean by that top edge. All right, so let me get, here it is. So here's my quilt. I'm going to sew it onto the back and bring it around to the front, just like I would if I were machine sewing a cotton binding. That's the way I always do it, so that I can control what it looks like on the front. So I want that top stitching to all be on the front so I can see it and make sure I get it to look good. So I'm going to sew the binding to the back. I'm going to find my end. And I want to make sure that I can sew it, like I said, with the top to here. So if I put the top to this edge, it's the wrong side. So I need to find the other end of my binding. There we go. There's the top edge. And I'm going to put that against the raw edge of my binding. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little pin in here to hold that tail down. Then I'm going to come down a good, hand spread away. Stick a pin in here, and this is where I want to start sewing. So there are going to be some things here that if you're comfortable with cotton binding and you're really good at it, there's going to be some things that are very similar, and then there are going to be some things that are very different. So this creating a tail is exactly like we do. Then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to use clips. So I prefer the Jumbo Wonder Clips, which are these guys here. You can get a whole big bag of them, where they have a mixed bag of different sizes. These jumbo clips are my favorite, and you only need a few. This one has 24 in it. I use 3. So I can use them for all sorts of things. I also flip it upside down. which bothers some people, and I know it's upside down, but it works better for me because it holds the binding flatter. When I put them in like this, it pinches the binding more. So I put them upside down. Okay. So then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to clip this a little bit. So unlike other places where we have pinned it so that it can't move at all, we're actually going to let this kind of do its thing. We're going to make sure that we've held it in place so it stays basically where I want it, but we're not going to fight the moving of it so much. If it stretches just the tiniest bit as we go, it's going to be okay. We're not going to panic about it. All right, so I'm going to go over and I'm going to start sewing at this pin, and I'm going to work my way down. Okay, I'm going to do the corner and I'll explain it when I'm doing it, and then I'll pull it out and show it to you guys how we do that. So let me move you one more time.
Teresa, if you don't lay it out before you put the binding on to know where the seam is falling, or you don't care?
I don't care.
Okay,
Also,
I'm
I
just
always
asking.
do it on a side. So this is the
Okay,
long side. So I always try to do it in the middle of a side where it's
gotcha,
not going to be crossing over one of these seams. That's
gotcha.
the only
Okay,
thing I want to make sure of, is that that seam isn't going to end up in here. I will
Mm.
tell you, I am queen of getting my seams in my binding right on a corner, usually the third corner. I don't know how I do it, but I manage it all the time. We'll see how I do today. So I'm not saying that I picked the right place to start it, because often it ends up kind of messing with me. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get everything up onto the table here for me. And I'm going to start where I put that pin in. And I'm going to get this a 1/2 inch away. So find out where my seam allowance goes. And then I've got my Annie stiletto, which is also one of my very favorite tools. I will tell you, the thing that I like about this stiletto is that it has a sandblasted tip, so it's really grippy and it has a really nice point, so I can grab things and move things around however I want to. So I can use it kind of as another finger to have a lot more control over. So I'm going to use that as I'm sewing. And I'm just going to go ahead and start sewing. I'm not going to back stitch or anything. I'm just going to sew with a regular straight stitch, again with the 3.0 stitch length. I'm going to go ahead and just stitch it like I did before. Nothing special with this. We're just going to go straight around. Now, as I come up here, you can't see it too much, but there is a little push that's happening here. And all I'm going to do, and it's a little push, okay, is I'm just going to kind of let it be. So if yours is becoming like a little inchworm, that's not what we want. You're pushing too hard. But it can move just the tiniest bit and you're okay. The other thing you can do is use your stiletto to kind of hold it down and feed it underneath the foot, and that will keep it from pushing forward very much at all. So once I've got a couple of those clips out, I'll feed out some more binding and then replace those clips. I'm going to put one down here, and then I'm going to sew down to the corner. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of keep the clips on there and keep them really, so all of the edges match. And you'll see that sometimes they'll want to fight against you and kind of move out of the way. So definitely keep an eye on that and keep a consistent seam allowance. Okay, now as I get down here to the corner, I'm going to kind of eyeball it where about a 1/2 inch is. And I'm going to stick a pin in for myself. And sometimes there are marks on sewing machine feet that will tell you where 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch is. So you can kind of check your foot and see if there's a mark on it. Okay, at a 1/2 inch, I'm going to put my needle down. And now I'm just going to twist it so that I'm going to sew off the corner. So you might do this technique for cotton quilts, you might not, but it works for both. Okay, so I have sewn it over to the corner and then gone right off at a right angle at that corner. Okay, so at this point, my binding is coming off here, but what I want to do is to get it to come down this side. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull it up, and then I'm going to push it back down and get it to go along that edge. So this is the look that we're going for. What I always want to make sure of is that my fold here is not above this raw edge. So the way that you guys can see this raw edge here, that's the way it should look for you. If you get this fold above that raw edge, you're going to end up with a pocket in your binding corner, and that's not what we want. We want to keep it kind of tight. So make sure that you can see that raw edge back here. So now I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to clip this. And I'm going to start it again. I'm going to start just a little bit of this and show you how we do that. So we're going to start at that corner and stitch down the next side. So we're not stitching over that fold. And that's a common error. Okay, and the part of the thing with the clips is really it just holds it where you want it to be as you get there. It's not really, not holding it flat, but it keeps it kind of the raw edge where it needs to be. Okay, so let me show you this. So this is what your corner is going to look like when you've sewn it the next time. So you should not sew across here. Okay, we'll take this pin out. It's loose. All right, does that make sense? So we're going to do that. You're going to sew all the way around the quilt until you get back to where you pinned it. And this pin is my starting stopping point. So once I get back over here, I'm going to stop sewing. So that's what my other one is at. So we're going to throw that one out of the way. I'll finish it this afternoon. So now I've got my binding. This one is all sewn on. And I have come back to where I started. Let's see if I can get this to be right. So here's where my pin was. This is where I started. I stopped here, and now I've got my tail and a tail. All right. So I'm going to put you back up on the thing so I can show you how I do this part of joining the tails. Okay. So we've gotten all the way here. Let me get this turned around so you can see it a little better. So I'm going to take this out, and you can see my tail. And then I'm going to cut this one off too. Now, technically, you're going to cut this one twice, but I hate dealing with this big long tail. It starts to feel very kind of overwhelming to me. So I'm just going to cut it off over here. I'm just going to snip it here. Like, okay, so I'm going to cut it between these lines. And now I've got two manageable tails in my brain. These are very manageable. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this out. And I'm going to lay it out against that raw edge, make sure that it's not pulling or folding or anything. Okay. And I'm going to pin that in place. And then I'm going to bring this one over here. And I'm going to give it just the tiniest pull. So I'm not really stretching. You see, I could stretch it. We don't want to do that, but we don't want it to be too loose. So I'm just going to give it kind of a tiny little pull. And I'm going to put that there. Now, we can use the piece of our binding that we cut off, or you can use your ruler. And I'm going to find a place about in the middle of this that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark the side that comes this way. If it ends over here, I'm going to mark it on this side of the strip. And the other one ends over here, so I'm going to mark it on this side of the strip. Okay. So I've marked the top one on the far side, the bottom one on the other side here. So we have a bit of an overlap, and we should have 1 3/4 inch overlap. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this off. And I'm going to take this. Here's my little mark. You could absolutely mark the rest of that line with a ruler if you wanted to get a more perfect 45. So now at this point, this is when I know I'm doing it right, because I got to overlap. Okay. When I panic is when I've cut it in there, you know, this instead, or sometimes this, and then you just have to do it twice. So this is what we actually want to do. So now at this point, I'm going to turn this one over. I'm going to put this one here, just like we did the other binding joins. Okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to mark it as well. I keep moving my rulers and I lose them. What did I do with it? There it is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark this again from my corner, and I'm going to use my 45 because I can't really see where it ends over there, but I know it should be a 45-degree angle from the corner. So at that point, I can kind of do a double check. Here's my line where it ends, and there's the fabric where it ends. So that worked out perfectly. And I'll go ahead and sew that seam. And I'm going to leave you be there for a second while I sew it. Okay, so this I'm doing the same thing where I'm going to start in, back stitch, go forward, back stitch, and leaving those pins in there so that they hold my fabric really nice. This is one of the things with Cuddle is the more that I can leave my pins in while I'm sewing, the better results I have. So now we're going to do the thing that we need to do always is check it, make sure that it's laying right. You don't have the problem with it twisting quite as often with this as you do with a cotton one because we don't have the 2 layers, but sometimes it can get twisted. So make sure that you've double checked it. Then we're going to go ahead and trim those seam allowances again. Okay. And now we'll go ahead, stitch that the rest of the way down, and then we'll do the rest of our seam. So I'm going to sew this, and then we'll talk about how we do the next part. Okay, so let me get this, and I'm going to pin it right in the middle after I get it under my foot here. Hey, Hawk, could you help me for half a second? I would like, so they can see me sewing the binding on, is there any way that you could move the computer over here, hold the computer, get your phone in here?
We'll just try bringing this around, okay, everybody, hang on.
Okay, close your eyes. It's gonna get dizzy. I love having someone here who can help me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, all right, so now I've got my whole piece sewn on. So I went right over that. Now it's sewn on and it's gonna come around to the front, all right? So the next thing we're gonna do, and I'm gonna start down here so we can see how we do a corner, is I'm going to pull this over. And what I want is this raw edge to line up with this stitching line, all right? Can you all see that okay?
Yep.
Here's the stitching line, raw edge. So I'm gonna bring this over, and I'm gonna use a clip. And I'm gonna bring it over and use a clip. Thanks, Hawk. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead.
Now, did you twist that edge? Is the edge to the stitching line, or is it turned under a little so that
Nope.
it doesn't
Nope,
flake?
the raw edge goes right up to this stitching line.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no turn under, nothing. If you don't want to try to turn it under, and it will do that a little bit if you've accidentally stretched it. So try not to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this over, tuck this under my machine, and I'm going to switch this to a zigzag, to a 4x4 zigzag. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zigzag so that when it zigs over here and zags right on the raw edge. Now, the thing about this is that I can't exactly see where the raw edge, so I will kind of keep looking and moving it under and looking and moving it under. Okay, so I try to figure out where my raw edge is, and then I keep my stiletto there. So here I can kind of look under, I'll pull it down, I'll sew. I'm gonna tell you go slower. I'm gonna try to, I'll go as slow as I think that you should go. I might have some practice doing binding. So really, you want to kind of just chug along here. Okay, make sure that you're getting it. Figure out on your machine. I have a little red line where my needle comes down on this side. So that's actually what I'm trying to line my raw edge up to, is my stitching line here. I make sure that that's lined up underneath. And then I grab my fabric and get it in there so that I hold it where I want it to be. And then I aim that toward that line. Okay. Thanks, Hawk. Okay, so now once we get down, once we get down to this corner, I'm just gonna hold it and I'm gonna sew right into that corner. I'm gonna sew a couple of stitches into it. Then I'm gonna do a little lock stitch and cut my thread. So the reason I want to do this is because it's easier for me. You can try to do the fold in here. I have a really hard time doing it, even with all my practice. So I stitch right off the end and then refold this and try to get this to be fairly decent. I'll do a little clip. I'll do another little clip to try to hold these while I get the next corner started. Okay, then I'm going to hold this with my stiletto, get it underneath the foot, put my foot down, and then I can let it go. If I try to do that beforehand, it's really not going to want to do it. So I got to kind of force that first little part. All right, and then I'm just going to pull this over and keep on stitching. You're going to go around the whole thing like this. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this out. All right, you can go set them back down on the table. Thank you. Okay. So now it's just like Sew Together Tuesday. Except you're holding a computer instead of the phone or a camera. Okay, so here's what my stitching looks like right now. And you can see that I can kind of see the stitches and I can see where it goes. This is where this little stiletto comes in handy because I can kind of just come over this and fluff this all up and it will pull the fibers out of that little zigzag and make it all kind of go away. Okay, so this is it before I pulled the stitches out. This is after I pulled the stitches out, and you can see how much nicer that looks. So this is kind of something that I'll stitch the whole thing, and then afterward you can use it as an excuse to watch a movie or your favorite TV show and just fluff the fibers. It's a very brainless thing to do, but it's very satisfying in the end because it looks so nice. Now on the back, it's the same way. Your goal is to get it right along this edge so that your zigzag is hidden in the binding on the back as well. All right. So we're going to try to fluff some of these up, and I'll do the same thing. And I kind of, you can see I'm not super gentle with it, and I'm not trying to pull out each fiber. I just kind of scratch it up, and that's that zigzag because it's nice and wide. So a 4x4 zigzag, 4 wide, 4 long is what I use. And that gives it enough strength to be able to handle this, but also to hold the binding. And I've never had any issues with it. So once it's fluffed up, that's kind of what it's going to look like. It's going to be beautiful. I showed you the one yesterday. So this is the same, but it's done the same way, but I'm trying to think. This is marble is what this binding is. You can't really see the zigzag on there. Okay. This is the back. So this one, I will say that if you do it with something like this where it is a dark blue binding, I did use a dark blue or a dark blue thread so that it would kind of blend in there, which means that you have to be extra careful to get it on the back because if it ends up on the white, you're going to see it more. So there are sometimes you have to be a little more careful, but with a little bit of practice and really just kind of taking your time and doing that, the aiming correctly on your machine, that's really the thing with it, is figuring out, okay, so where does my stitch go? Where is the zigzag? Where does that go? Where is my stitching line before? And where's the raw edge and how do I get it over there? I find that the stiletto is really the key to getting a nice binding. I will say I've had a lot of practice, but I'm really proud of how good these bindings are. They do work out very, very well. So, and it's surprisingly simple to do. So here's another one. So you can see they turn out a little different depending on it. This one, I haven't done a ton of fluffing on it, so it's still kind of stuck in there. When I show you over here, you can't tell at all. So that's kind of nice. This is one with a hide. Okay. So they all work very nice. I like to use a binding. The weave is a very directional one, and I really like the way that it comes around and does this kind of, there's kind of a line on here, like you get this, and then on this side, the lines go this direction. I really like that. I think it looks really nice. But usually if I'm trying to do a binding, I will choose something, if I have to choose my own, I'll choose something that's like a hide, a galaxy, a marble, something where the nap is kind of going in all sorts of ways. So it's not as easy to tell if your naps are going the wrong direction, because that can definitely happen. There was another one. Let me see. Oh, here it is. So this is one that I did with a C3. So this is obviously just a little sample that you can use with the printed batting is what this is a sample of. But this is the C3 with a serpentine stitch and a straight stitch. Where did I just see it? Yeah, so here's a straight stitch there and then the zigzag. So I prefer the serpentine with the Cuddle 3. I think it looks nicer. It's easier to get it to kind of to hide any errors in the uniformity. So zigzags, sometimes if they're not moving through your machine right, they'll get a little tighter and then they'll get looser. And you can see that all on the C3, which I don't like. But a serpentine, if it's not feeding through exactly the same every S curve, I can't really tell the difference. So I'm always trying to look for ways that are going to kind of hide anything I have to fudge. There was another one. Here it is. So this one is with the sparkle cuddle. I'll see if you guys can see this. So this is the binding edge on a serpentine, and you can see it just kind of hides in there really nicely. But here are some others on a C3. So this is a faggoting stitch. This is that big serpentine, a zigzag, and a straight stitch. Okay, so there's all sorts of choices when you bring that around. These are self-binding, but it works the same way that when you're doing the regular binding, bringing that over. I like to use the serpentine, or you can even use a blanket stitch, which is really nice. It just takes a lot longer. But there's all sorts of choices with when doing it. When you're doing the cuddle, the luxe cuddle, I really do just suggest doing just a big zigzag, because it will hide your stitches the best and you can really fluff those fibers out. Make sure that you do a nice big zigzag too, because the tighter you get your zigzag, the harder it is to get those fibers out. So, and which makes it harder to hide your stitching line. So making a big loose one, I do use a 5x5 on some machines. It depends on how fast it feeds it through. So give it a try on some extra stuff that you have. Give it a try on the side to see what you like. Get your stitch the way that you really like it, and then you can go from there. All right, so that's the basics on how you do the binding. What questions do we have, Pam?
So one of them was basically just like a reiteration. How wide was the first seam allowance?
1/2 inch.
Yep, okay. And then as far as the corner, when you get a 1/2 inch away from that corner, you pivot and you
Yep.
do 45-degree sew off, correct?
Yep.
And then you do your mitered corner, making sure that that fold is not above the quilt, but
Correct.
slightly below.
Slightly
but
below
not
the raw edge. Yep.
Yeah. And then you sew a 1/2 inch. And then when you flip it over, you are sewing at a zigzag at about a 5 millimeter wide by 5 millimeter long.
Yep.
Approximately. And yeah, we watched how you did your mitering of your strip prior to flipping over. So,
Mhm.
there's another question about, let's see, for all fabrics, do you cut the binding with the same 1 3/4?
For all the different cuddle fabrics, yes. Yes, I
Okay.
do them all at 1 3/4.
Even the C3 when you choose to use that? Okay.
Yep.
But I can totally, I choose Lux Cuddle whenever possible because it does hide a lot
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, totally. So it depends on what you're trying to do. I will say and it's funny because it kind of goes against what a lot of people think, is that the C3 would be so much easier. And actually the Luxe cuddles are so much easier. Do make sure that you're not choosing one that is a very long nap. Those are a little bit harder. I have, I'm not sure where my sample is. I have one that I did with Luxe Cuddle Frost, which is a lot longer. And it was a little bit harder. And I will say anything that has the embossing, that swishing around of the fibers, is easier to hide your stitching. So you could use something like Seal, and people have used that for a binding, but you will see all of those stitches just like you would for a C3 because it's smooth.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I did use Seal on a binding for a quilt.
Mhm.
And it turned out really pretty, but I had to check to make sure that I actually was catching the fabric on top.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
okay.
it definitely, you have to keep an eye on things. It gets a lot easier, and especially I feel like it's a lot of the getting better at it part, the practice with it, is figuring out where to look on your machine and on your foot to figure out where to make those things all come together, because you're trying to make the raw edge line up with the previous stitching line. That's the key. So you don't want to pull that over. That's something that people will do, is that they'll pull it way over so that the binding comes all the way over to the front. That's not what we want. We're trying to create a 1/2 inch binding on all 4 edges.
Yeah.
So just do it. Honestly, doing some practice. The way that I originally tried to learn how to do binding worked very well, and that I created a 20 by 20 inch quilt sandwich. And then I bound that, and then I cut off the binding, and I did it again, and then I cut off the binding and did it again until I ended up having like a little 10-inch square. But I had bound it like 6 times. So I had practiced my corners that many times. I practiced my endings that many times. And it did make a big difference in just being able to kind of nail down those skills without having to do it on a big quilt. Like if you're doing it, we're doing a lullaby this time, so it's a decently small quilt to do. But I've definitely seen people try to learn on one of the large, crazy 8 quilts, 60 by 72 inch blanket. And it's a lot to try to learn on that. By the end, they're really good. But then you're back to the part where you didn't do very well and you have to take stuff out and try to fix it because now you know better. So we're doing on a small piece and actually just practicing it a few times, those skills, just using it as a practice is really helpful. So this lullaby will do the same thing for you and give you a little bit of practice to do it, but use your scraps too, because you do have some extras from here. And go ahead and practice your binding, practice the stitches, see what you like best.
Yeah. So LaRonda's question, is there a chart with all the seam and binding sizes? Well, we just confirmed that 1.75 is really the size of the binding. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And that information is in your pattern. And you showed earlier the binding with Cuddle booklet, which has a little bit more information in it, but not a whole lot. You really do have a whole lot of binding information in here. It's going to tell you all of the things that I told you, including how to do the mitered corner, or the sewing off the corner, mitering it, bringing it up, bringing it back around, how to stitch it off. The only thing it doesn't really tell you in here is how I finish it, where I bring those 2 ends together. It just says to, close them up, because it seems to be something that people can get a little finicky about and have their own way of doing it. So we let you.
Okay. And then she just asked, or she said, I meant the zigzag stitch size. So that was 5 millimeters wide by 5 millimeters long.
Yep, 4 or 5. It depends on your machine. So that's one of those things that I say, test it out, see what you like. I've never done it on a machine smaller than a 4 and liked it. So I do know that some people will do it at 3.5, but I feel like it's too small and I can't get the fibers to pull up as well. So I stick with a 4 on my machine. But I have done it on a 5 on like lower end machines, don't feed it through quite as fast. So I'll do it a little bit bigger stitch.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Teresa, would
Any
you
other
like,
questions?
oh, yeah, I want to know if Teresa would like to see her doppelganger.
Yes.
See
Let
that?
me- Hang on 1 second. Let me add a spotlight.
There we
Wow, who is that?
That's my nephew's girlfriend.
That
Oh,
is
wow.
hilarious. Yeah.
I've been thinking of her the whole time I'm watching you.
That is funny. Yes, we could be related.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's funny.
That's funny. Nice. All right. Anything else you guys want to know about it? And then do you want to talk about some of the things I've got sitting around here?
Yeah, you can go ahead and unmute and ask a question if you'd like.
Teresa, didn't you do the top binding a little different than you did the back at the corners? You sewed off instead of turning back, folding back and coming around? You said to reduce the bulk?
I'm not sure what you mean.
When you came down into the corner, you said
Mhm.
about sewing off the edge,
Right?
off the stitch
Yep.
and sewed off the edge instead of folding back?
You fold it back on the second part. So you stitch it off the edge on the first seam and then you put it back in and then you sew it over that fold.
You did it on the top and bottom both?
It's only you only do it one side. Because then when you flip it over, oh yeah, I guess I know what you're saying. When I did it here and I bring it around and I stitch this down, I just stitch straight into here and then I fold it up. So I miter it like by hand at that point. Yeah,
Gotcha.
and just bring it
Okay.
around. And
That's
it's
where you-
surprisingly,
That's where you lost me and I thought, what did she do?
got it. So I sew straight off into the, like, along the edge of it. Some
Right.
people will try to do the little flip thing under there and do the miter under the foot. I have never been able to get it to do it consistently so that I find it more more frustrating to try to do that. What did I do with my other quilt? I have two of them now. I lost one. I find it more frustrating to do it that way because I never get it right. Not never, but rarely. Okay, so this is the
Do
way
it by
that that,
hand and to play with it.
yeah, so that's the way that that turns out. And sometimes you'll get a little, in fact, right here, I can even see it. There's a little, you can see my stitching line right there because it didn't get pulled over quite as far. I don't care. But it looks much better than if I did it otherwise. That's what you'll get is like a,
Baby can't see the seam line.
exactly. Yeah. Hawk and I always say, is it soft? That's what we really care. That's why we're sewing it with Cuddle. Is it
Thank
still
you.
soft? Yes, you're fine then. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And those miter corners, what I love about them is that you can't really see a miter at all. So they're not like cotton bindings where it can really, you have to be very persnickety about how you fold it over and get it perfectly nice and crisp. And, you know, some people hand sew those corners down. That we don't have to do anything
I've
even
been
remotely
tempted to
like
put
that.
Cuddle on some of the bigger quilts just to get them done.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And lots of people will actually do that, especially kids love it, but the binding is so much easier to do it that way. We had you had a whole bunch of stuff that you showed earlier with our tip sheets and the patterns and everything. And I wanted to let you know that we're redoing all of our tip sheets. So
Oh.
there will be new ones coming out in probably about a month that we'll have all new ones that are even more tips like this. So things that will be included would be like the stitch width and length. We don't have those finished and printed yet, but those will be coming. So do watch for those in the whole tips and tricks, I think it's called at the bottom. And that's where those new ones will be located. And we're doing them about long arming and about machine embroidery and the binding and self-binding and all sorts of different things to really give you a much more full tip sheet and information that you can have accessible for you when you're doing these. There is
That be
something
in your blog, announce
that will
blog
that
or
will
something so we'll know.
it'll be in the Shannon Fabrics blog. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure. And you can always subscribe to that and get lots of information. They produce I think weekly blogs or so. There's always really good inspirational pieces in there, which is fabulous. I sew a decent amount, but they have a bunch of sewers that make great stuff. And I think we probably have 10 people who sew projects for us almost all the time. So there's always new projects coming out, and the blog is the place to find those, or on our Instagram. So the Instagram shares a lot of those. If you don't follow us there, there's tons of inspirational posts there.
I'm not good at Instagram.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Cool. Well, do you have anything else to show us? I know we were talking about a possible trunk show, but we sure love the fact that you spent the time showing us binding because that was awesome. We learned
It's a
lot
great
from
skill
that.
to have. It is a great skill to have because you can use it for all sorts of things. So I have a decent number of things sitting around here. So let me show you.
Yeah.
I know we talked yesterday about the stuffed animals and you have a bunch of the Funky Friends Factory.
I do have quite a few. Mhm.
Okay. Do you have any of the rustic horseshoe patterns?
No, is that the stick horses?
The dragon, the
Oh,
ostrich, the
okay.
cactus, the
Yeah.
horse. I do
Okay.
a lot of her patterns. So hers are great. I need to email you and I'll send you a link to her stuff.
Sure. And then we also were gonna get together with your coat pattern.
Yes. And I will send you information about that as well, for
Okay.
sure. Let me grab a couple of things really fast. Oh, here, I'll bring you Larry so you can look at him. This is one of my favorite stuffies. Okay.
Oh.
He's adorable. Absolutely adorable.
And speak up if you know of something that you would like to see.
Yeah, if you'd like to see a particular skill in something, let me know. So I'll just show you a few different things that I've got. Whoopsie. I did make this one recently, which was a Funky Friends for Christmas. How cute is he?
Oh, that's cute.
So adorable.
Oh,
I love him. And I have to say, I love the thing about Funky Friends that I love is that she does things in her patterns to make them sit right or act right in these ways that I like are super interesting to me. So in this one, for example, I did the I want to say this is Sherpa. I think it is.
it looks like it.
Yeah. So super cute little beard. I didn't realize that his hair back here, it said head, and I wasn't sure that that was going to be that. I would have changed that to be Sherpa too. But one of the things is in there, there is a headpiece, top of headpiece. And I was like, I don't understand. And so I did make it flesh colored like his face. And but then when I sewed it in, it's actually in here. So that when you stuff it, you're not stuffing his hat, which I thought was so clever because I was like, how do we keep the stuffing from, he's going to have this big cone head and it's not that way in the picture. Turns out she's just clever in her pattern drafting. And I absolutely love that sort of stuff with this. This is, yeah, super cute. I love him a lot. Yeah, he was
Are
my
they
one.
easy? Is it easy to do if you have troubles manipulating your hands at times? I mean, I love the size of them, so I'm thinking that even with arthritis, you can do this.
You can, and I would suggest that if you look at the Funky Friends Factory website, she actually lists them out. It has a grading system for ease. So she'll tell you which ones are easier, and I will tell you the ones that have less pieces are obviously going to be easier. You could also enlarge them, and when you enlarge them, they get much easier. So this Larry the Lion is, I think, at 150%. So he's quite a bit bigger. He is supposed to be at 10 inches. So I think that he would normally sit about this tall, but I enlarged him 150% so that he would be bigger and easier to put together. So that is one thing. One of the easiest ones that I would really suggest starting with is this little guy. So this is Pete the pup, or puppy dog Pete. I can't remember.
Oh,
what his
that's so cute.
He's adorable. I love him. This is the Shaggy that I know that they have some because they were showing off the yellow yesterday. So this is the frosted Shaggy is what this is. He's got big floppy ears. You can see his legs are big and floppy. There's not a bunch of pieces with this. This is a much easier one. And we do have this as a tutorial. So I did this one a couple of years ago. There's a whole step-by-step on our Sew Together Tuesday playlist.
Can you tell me the colors of that?
It is simply taupe
Okay,
is what the C3 is.
uh-huh.
And let me grab the header for that. And I will tell
Easy to do, and he's as cute as that. We
How
might
did
have
you
to make
ever
him.
remember all those colors?
Looks.
And they deal with it all the time. They're pretty good at it.
Oh, okay. The Shaggy, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, the Shaggy is Lux Cuddle Cocoa Snow.
okay.
So frosted Lux Cuddle. And then just a little bit of black for his nose.
Cute.
And I sewed his nose on a little crooked, so he's got like a little to a snout, which I think is hilarious. But this is one of the easier ones. And
Okay,
this one is made at 100%. And I
okay.
do know a few people have made it bigger than that, so you could absolutely enlarge that one too, and he's still really cute. But trying to get legs like this are a lot easier than getting legs, like this.
Yeah,
So kind of just figuring out the skills as you go is really super helpful. He's one of my favorite. This is another one that we have. This is the
Yeah.
lamb. This one
yeah.
is enlarged 120% because I did do it at 100% in this fabric. And let me just say, it was really hard. So I wouldn't suggest it. Blow this guy up, but he's super cute. And this is the elephant from Funky Friends as well. So I really do love stuffed animals. I think they're super fun to make, and they're very satisfying in the end. You're like, oh, look at that. It's totally lovable and sweet. It's funny because when I've done the classes, we almost always have people who want to make them for their grandbabies. And then by the time that they're done with the class, they just want to keep it for themselves because, they put a lot of work in there and they're just adorable. So one of the other things I wanted to show you was embroidery on cuddles. So I know that there's some embroidery people. And embroidery works really well. This was from a project that we did with Reen Wilcoxon from Embroidery Garden. And this is a embroidery that she did. We did a little cinch sack and a little lovey. This pattern is from Melly and Me, which is really cute. It's called the Little Lovey Love. But you can see the embroidery works out so beautifully on the cuddle. So we'll be talking about embroidery all of this month for Sew Together Tuesday and all of the Shannon, not all of the Shannon fabric stuff, but a lot of it. And it'll be on our website as well on the blog. Tips on doing embroidery with it. There's not much that you do different, but there's a few little tips that we've got that will help you embroider on it. It turns out just gorgeous. I absolutely love the embroidery on it. You can also mix cotton. That's what this one is. This one is shoved full of very bright fabric. But this one is a mix of cotton and cuddle to make a little stitch stack. You can absolutely mix substrates. It works out well. This is another cute little guy. Okay. We also do all sorts of fun things on there. So we have the little rainbow pillow is one of, there we go. The rainbow pillow is one of our kits. It goes with a blanket that is actually done with applique as well. We have a tutorial for that. We've got the Kimber Bear, which I saw a few people had yesterday, which is a fun little guy. Also comes with a kit that you can get that has a little applique on that one too. What else do I have? Oh, let me show you this. One, I usually tell people to start with the infinity scarf because it's the easiest thing to do. I will tell you, keep it in mind for the holidays when you need to make a bunch of gifts for people. They are so fast and easy. It's crazy. We did it recently. We were trying out new fabrics to see what would work. Generally, we use a Luxe Cuddle. I can't remember what this one is. Frosted Heather. I bet this is Heather. It's very pretty, lovely, 2 shades of like kind of a turquoise and a navy. Well, we decided to do it in Arctic Fox, and we had this ginormous thing. So if you need it, which I could see, you guys might need a scarf this big. Okay. Normally they're this big. You can get them huge. All right. So we like to try out different things, see what we get. Oh, I have all sorts of things. We talked a little bit about cuddle and I've on for quilt backs. So I'll show you this one first. So this was pieced, then put on the long arm and quilted, which is gorgeous. Okay. This is with a kind of a higher loft polyester batting in there. So using a higher loft will give you a lot of texture to it. We have used it with the polyester with a thin batting, a thicker batting. I've also used it with wool and I really like it. And just recently I made one of my coat samples with a cuddle lining and it was with a silk batting, which turned out really nicely too. So all sorts of options with the batting choices. This is one that was done with a very thin batting. But I just want to show you this one. I did straight line quilting on my sewing machine. So you can see, you can absolutely do that. It ends up showing it really nicely. This is that frost binding that I was talking about that is super fluffy. So this is a cotton front quilt. So just a little cotton quilt that I backed with cuddle and then bound it with the Luxe Cuddle. So there's all sorts of opportunities to use cuddle in lots of different things. Obviously, the coat is another example. You can use it for a ton of things. We've done it for hats. We did little trapper hats this year. Super cute. Yeah, it is amazing how many things you can make with this stuff. We have
What is the pattern for the trapper hat?
this is a pattern called Made by Me patterns,
Okay.
and it is literally called trapper hat.
Okay.
Yeah, super simple pattern, but really very cute. And I love how just super simple it was to make. So very quick and easy project. I think there's anything else I want to make sure and show you. So this was one more thing. I'll show you this. This was my latest little project for myself. And this is a double-sided cloud with the Luxe Cuddle binding. So with this, it's a little bit different. So it's how we put the one together over the last couple of days where we stitched it, and that's how it kind of quilted together the front and the back. This one, I just spray basted the two together, and I just lightly spray basted 2 layers of cloud cuddle together, back to back, and then I cut them out and then I bound it. And it just turns out to be a very nice, easy
Super
blanket.
cute.
Okay. Yeah, it's super cute. And I love how squishy it is. So this cloud is one of those things that if you can get your hands on it and try it, you can see how much it squishes down. And I always it's like the Charmin commercials, you know, like don't squeeze the Charmin. And I'm like, but it's soft. We forgot one thing. And I just saw it on this blanket. And that's what reminded me is this little made with love tag.
Oh
So
yeah,
you should
somebody was
have
saying.
these.
Yeah.
You should have these. Pam, did you know that you can buy these too? You can
No.
You
No,
can
I
buy
didn't.
these. So you can
Okay.
get them on the website and you can
Okay.
resell them and people want them. So I'm gonna
Okay.
suggest that you
Yeah.
do that and then let me know so I can send people there. But you
Yeah.
can buy these little tags from Pam when she gets them. They also come one in your kit. And you should have one of these. Mine was in my book, so sometimes they get kind of lost in places. And you're just gonna put this in before, sew it along the edge before you sew your binding. So this was mine. So I sewed it in and then I did the binding over it.
Does it
So it
have
has-
care instructions on the
That's
back?
exactly what it is. Yep. So it says
Yeah.
made with love on one side. And then this is where my old lady eyes get me. Made with fabric from Shannon Fabrics, making the world a softer place. 100% polyester, machine wash cold, tumble dry, no heat, no fabric softener. Okay. So that's a great thing to add to your project, especially if you're giving it as a gift. And a lot of times these are baby gifts that we want to make sure that they know, so that no fabric softener is a thing. Okay, Barb's showing us. Oh, she stuck it in. There it is. Barb is showing us. She put her label in. Yep, and that's exactly how you do it. Just stick it in there,
Perfect.
and then it's
Yeah,
a great
definitely
reminder.
weapons.
Yeah, but you can buy these individually, and
Perfect.
then sell them to everybody.
Yep, I'll buy 'em.
Yeah, people really like them, and they only come one to a kit, so you're kind of stuck with just having one. Anyway, I'm gonna squeeze this for a while.
Do you have the pocket scarf?
I think I do. Yes.
Pam, do you have that cloud with the bears? Or
I
whatever that-
don't have the cloud with the bears. That's a new one.
That's a
But I-
brand new one. Mhm.
I have about 5 bolts of cloud though.
And it is such good fabric. We have 2 tutorials we did with it for Sew Together Tuesday. We did one that was a hoodie, and then we did one that was just about cloud in general. So this is the pocket scarf. To put it on, it'll probably hit my mic. Okay, so then it has a little pocket here, has a little pocket here. Super duper easy. This one is with, I'm not going to remember the name of the fabric, but it's the kind that has like, when you bend it, it has blue under there. You see that?
Oh, yeah.
Super cool.
Beautiful.
But it is a little thick. So it's the one we did for the show. It's a little bit thick to sew. It's fine. It turned out okay, but it definitely wouldn't be the one that I would say start with the thick fabric. I don't think it's Arctic Fox, is it? Hawk thinks it might be. Yeah. I don't know. It's beautiful. And I love the way that the blue pops out in there. It's super fun. But the pocket scarf uses 1 yard of fabric, and it makes this little super cute, easy to make scarf that has pockets for your hands or for your phone or for anything else. Yeah. Hey. Also, this is my chronic thing, is that I don't ever sew my turning hole shut. Almost all the samples, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a little hole in him. Oh, there's a little hole. Oh, there's a because my samples just stay here. I should probably spend a day sewing up turning holes. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions for me? Otherwise, I'm gonna let you get back to sewing, and I'm gonna go do some sewing myself.
I have one quick question on that one that you showed with the cloud. How big is that and how many yards do I need?
It is just 1 yard of the cloud, and I just cut it in half and put those 2 half yards together. So
For
that's
that
what
one that you showed with, you said that was, yeah, that one.
Yep. So it's 30 by 36 basically. Okay. So it's
Okay.
a yard long and then 30 inches across, basically, because I got the yard of fabric and then just cut it down the middle.
And
And
then
put
your
the two-
binding, again, just get enough to do 3 strips or
Yeah,
what?
you could get a quarter yard or half yard. Yeah. And then this is the thing, is like they just come apart. And so it's 2 layers that are only held together by the binding. And this is one of those things that often surprises people, because they're like, well, don't you need to sew them together? But you don't, because all I'm going to do is just give it a little flick and then they hold together just like they were
Yeah,
together. Okay. Super duper easy to do.
yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and thank you Hawk and Teresa for joining us on this virtual quilt retreat.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. This was very fun. Hawk's coming in to say hi. There's
Yeah.
a thumb. So thank you very much. Make
Oh.
sure that you subscribe to all the stuff. Join us on I Love Cuddle, and Yeah, and then Pam, I will email you later, all right?
Okay, sounds good.
All right,
Thank you so
guys.
much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye.
sewing.
Thank
Bye.
you.